There's bound to be another book, isn't there?
You think? A sequel to
Whenever anybody says, that's it, that's all I'm going to say.
There's always more.
Yeah. Money talks, doesn't it?
Hello and welcome to The Royals with me, Roya Nikar from the Sunday Times. This week, Kate's away, but I'm delighted to say I'm joined by another royal correspondent who's had a front row seat at some of the biggest royal events for many years. Simon Vigar, hello and welcome.
Hi, Roy. Thanks very much indeed.
Now, you are Channel 5 News' royal correspondent. Yeah. And am I right in thinking you are the only contributor to Channel 5 News who was there right at the start in 1997?
Yeah, back in the Kirsty Young days. Yeah, so I'm the last remaining one there and been royal correspondent since 2007.
So are we technically calling you a spring chicken veteran?
You can, yeah. I'll take that.
Simon, you've been doing the royal beat since 2007?
Yeah.
So that's quite a long innings. That's even longer than me. Tell me about the best thing about the job.
The best thing about the job, and we both know it's not a holiday, but the best thing about the job are the foreign trips. In fact, in 2007, I covered the amazing inquest into the deaths of Diana and Dodi, which not amazing in a good way, but it went on for 6 months at the Royal Courts of Justice. Every conspiracy theory was debunked.
Wow, in your first year of being a royal correspondent?
Yeah, well, that was actually just before I became a royal correspondent, because at the end of the 6 months, after the verdicts, my boss told me, and now you're going to be our royal correspondent. And I said, no, I'm a serious journalist. And he said, no, you're not. Which he was only half joking, I think.
And what was that like, covering the inquest?
The inquest, well, I think only in the UK would we spend millions of pounds on something to debunk all of the stupid conspiracy theories. And in the end, it didn't change anybody's mind. The people who think it's a grand conspiracy still think that. The people, including her closest friends, who think it was a terrible road traffic accident, believe that. And I remember Rosa Monckton, her friend, came up with one of the phrases in the whole inquest was that Diana was an extraordinary woman and people can't accept she died in an ordinary road crash, obviously with chasing mopeds and paparazzi as well.
Was it quite an emotional time? Was it quite an emotional thing to be covering?
It was, yeah. I mean, it was every day. Obviously the headline-grabbing days were when Mohammed Al-Fayed was there and Paul Burrell, but I mean, there were, the witnesses from France on a ropey video link, and I mean, they really did go into forensic detail on every single conspiracy theory. One example, if you were trying to divert a big, heavy Mercedes in a tunnel, would you choose a Fiat Panda? Probably not. But that was one of the theories that, the conspiracy theories that there were, which of course, Fayed was right behind.
So that was a massive story to sort of kickstart your royal career.
It delivered every single day.
You mentioned the tours are one of the best things. What's the best tour you think you've done?
I think when you go to, I'd be interested to know your answer to that actually.
Yeah.
The places where you go, which you would never normally be able to go to or afford to go to. So Solomon Islands in the Pacific was really special with William and Catherine in Diamond Jubilee year 2012. I've been
I
quite
went on to Borneo for that bit. I don't think you. Very few of us went into Borneo. Yeah, it was amazing.
You're up in the trees, weren't you?
And that huge story broke about the French magazine publishing the top place pictures. It became this. It went from being this extraordinary tour celebrating the Queen's Diamond Jubilee to something altogether very different and quite dramatic.
It was incredible. Something always happens on royalties, and the days that you think...
However dry that programme looks at the beginning of the week, something happens.
The days where you think, that's dull, not going to make, something will happen. And often they're the best days. So Solomon Islands, I was quite cynical up until then. The Queen was the Queen, and the King is the King of the Solomon Islands right now, one of the 15 countries where he's head of state. And I was quite cynical about the job and indeed the royal family. However, in the Solomon Islands, the Queen hadn't been there since the early 80s. Her grandson was there in her Diamond Jubilee year. We went to this great open-air religious service, and people literally had walked all day to get there. And then I saw, it meant a huge amount, and without wanting to sound patronising or anything like that, it meant a huge amount to them that William and Catherine were there. They arrived on this funny float, which had been dressed up to look like a boat.
Very colourful outfits, garlands.
Yeah, it was a great atmosphere, and it meant a lot to people. And I then sort of had a reality check then, thinking, actually, don't be so cynical. This does matter.
I think if I was to answer that question, I would say the trip to India and Bhutan in 2016, again with William and Kate, I remember going to the Taj Mahal and they literally emptied the Taj Mahal for a couple of hours for us. So to see that free of any tourists was incredible. And there had been this whole discussion of would they sit on the stone bench that Diana had so famously sat on all those years before, which had led to that iconic photo of her, which had led to the speculation around, the marriage and all of that. And William felt very divided about it. Even the night before, Arthur Edwards, the photographer, was like, go on, William, do it. And he's like, I'm not sure I want to. And then the day came, it was a Saturday, amazing for our deadlines. And they sat on the bench and we got the picture and that was it. It was fantastic. Yeah. But going to Bhutan, which I would never normally have gone and seen off my own back was interesting. Yeah. In terms of doing this job for as long as you have and we have, what do you think is the biggest change you've seen in over the years, over the way we report or the royal family, the way the royal family operate with us?
I think, everything's a lot quicker now, isn't it? Yeah. Because of social media, because they're self-publishing as well. They're publishing their own photos, as we know, including, the airbrushed ones, controversy of last year. So they're curating their own content. I think the access is getting worse. Compared to back then, because we got some informal off-the-record chats, and indeed some on-the-record chats. It doesn't feel like that's getting any better.
Why do you think that is?
Because they can have more control over it, so they do have more control. And I mean, we're sort of used to life near the goldfish bowl, or and the restrictions on us. Other journalists are very critical, as you know, of us, of being part of a PR campaign. We are not PR people.
No, we're not.
So that's the battle we're constantly having to fight in our own diplomatic way.
Yeah.
I think access is worse, yeah.
Interesting.
Because, on a short trip to Oman and UAE, I did get a quick interview with Prince Harry
I remember.
About that trip, start of the Invictus Games. It doesn't feel like that anymore.
Interesting. When we do occasionally get the brush bys at the end of a trip, but not always, and they're hard fought. But
the brush by at the end of the Fiji Tonga on the flight there was the infamous one where he said, "Thanks for coming, not that you were invited anyway."
That was a trip, wasn't it? Gosh, that was quite a trip.
When actually we were invited.
I know we were. You started to feel the wheels slightly come off on that trip, didn't you, to Australia, Fiji and Tonga? It just felt...
Definitely.
Meghan was pregnant, so it should have been a very happy time, but you could start to see the cracks in terms of the public role that was expected of them versus what they wanted to do in their lives.
Well, in hindsight, everybody's an expert.
Yeah.
But at the time, in Fiji, there were a couple of things. I mean, there was that roasting hot day where we were in a pen for 2 hours or, and we're just being glared at by the royal party. It's like, we're doing our job.
Happy memories.
They were in the shade, by the way.
I remember it very well.
And of course, there's the infamous market, which was meant to be Meghan's day.
Well, you and I were both there. Do you want to just remind our listeners of this? Because you and I were both on the rota covering. You were the broadcast rota, and I was the reporter doing the rota.
So,
because this has become something of a thing, this incident, hasn't it, over the years?
Well, it was weird when we were there. And
we were there to cover an event that Meghan was going to meet some women at a market in Fiji, local women who, had their own businesses and were excited to meet her.
Yeah, and this was Meghan's day in the whole 10-day schedule. This specifically was Meghan's day, an event at the university to start with, female education, female empowerment, then moving down to the market, which was hot, but it wasn't chaotic or dangerous. It was a big covered market. There was a clear route through, which all the security will have recce'd. And as you say, Meghan was meant to meet local business women there. And it was, supposed to last half an hour. And after about 10 minutes, it went into warp speed.
We were just rushed out, weren't we?
And my cameraman, Rui, on the rushes, you see the palace people pushing him back, saying, "Get back, Rui, get back." And she did not meet the people she was meant to meet, because they were all lined up looking aghast as she sort of whizzed past
rushed
them.
Out.
And they didn't speak to her, they didn't give her
That
anything.
was a classic example afterwards of sort of palace spin, wasn't there? Because they tried to...
They tried to say it was security. Well, if it was security, they would never have arrived.
No.
The car would never have come.
Yeah.
Because there's an advanced security party there. And then they said it was a health issue. But it was weird, and there was a moment where Meghan had spoken to her staff who were with her, and the whole atmosphere changed. You could see the whole atmosphere change.
I remember it, yeah.
And it was to do with who else was at the market.
Those tours are never dull, are they, Simon?
Something always happens.
In all your royal reporting over the years, Simon, what would you say is a sort of historical standout moment for you?
I think covering the late Queen's visit to the Republic of Ireland in 2011, that was truly special. And, the exotic ones, the exotic trips are great, but actually Republic of Ireland, of course, is the closest country to the UK. And she had been wanting to go there for years, wasn't allowed to because of security reasons. And finally in 2011, Queen Elizabeth went to the Republic of Ireland, the beginning of her speech at Dublin Castle, which drips in history between the two countries, of course. And of course, it was an incredible speech. It was an incredible moment, mostly in English, but the first few words in Dublin Castle, of all places, with the Irish president there, were in Gaelic or Irish. And that literally drew gasps. The trip was phenomenal for symbolic reasons.
Yeah.
She went to, various war memorials that meant a lot to both communities there.
Do you think it had an impact on the relationship between the two countries?
Yeah, I'm sure it did. And obviously it's complicated and it doesn't solve everything, but it is really the soft power that we often talk about. It's a fantastic demonstration of that. I interviewed a historian at Croke Park, which also, the original Bloody Sunday at Croke Park, going back 100 years or more. And for the Queen, for the granddaughter of George V to go there is astonishing after everything that happened there. And a historian said to me that the curse of the English is that they don't remember, and the curse of the Irish is they don't forget. And he did feel that this moment, actually thinking about it now is giving me goosebumps, because to see her there in this modern stadium, but still the same location as the original Bloody Sunday, it was just astonishing. It did mean a great deal. And it was only, a few years later, Sinn Féin sort of boycotted the Queen on that trip, but I think they realised the error of their ways. And it was a couple of years later that Martin McGuinness
she was shaking his hand.
Met her in Northern Ireland.
Well, what an amazing historical thing to cover. One for
Ireland.
Memoirs. So I'm going to ask you another question, which is, and actually before we came on, you were saying something very interesting, and I want to hear more about that from you. Is there a story you've covered in your time as a royal correspondent or before that was personally quite tricky or quite difficult to navigate?
Well, I wasn't royal correspondent at the time, but Channel 5 had just started in 1997, and within months, Diana died in Paris at the end of August 1997. I didn't go to Paris. I was in London covering what was, undoubtedly a week that changed this country.
Yeah.
A week that changed the royal family. At the beginning of the week, it was going to be a small private family funeral, Spencer family funeral. By the end of the week, it was definitely
a world event watched by billions.
And it was Tony Blair and his ministers who we believe, told the royal family and the Spencer family, this really can't be a small private funeral. Anyway, covering the this incredible tribute to Diana in Kensington Gardens in front of those famous gates by the palace there. It was very, very strange, and we were being blamed. Any media that was there with cameras or photographers, we were being heckled and spat at.
Spat at
in Kensington Gardens.
What was that? What did you do when that happened?
Well, I was a very junior reporter then, and so I definitely knew this was not normal.
No.
And I definitely knew that I wasn't responsible for killing Diana. But you just had to make your excuses. People were very, very upset.
Emotion just was high, wasn't it?
And we hadn't really seen that sort of public emotion in this country before. We have, people being much more public about their emotions has definitely happened since.
Yeah.
And I think that was a pivotal week in all of that. People were very upset. They were angry as part of grief. They were angry with the media. You lot. You killed her.
How do you mentioned it changed the nation and it changed the royal family. Tell me how you think it changed each.
In terms of public emotions, it changed the nation. So you definitely wouldn't, in terms of people expressing their emotions publicly and being emotive, that definitely changed that week. And the United Kingdom changed. And, if you see the images of the cortege and, William and Harry walking with their father and grandfather and uncle behind, the noise, if you see the Rushes, the original film, the noise of, I'm getting, goosebumps thinking of it now, of people wailing and screaming, and, it was incredible. And, terrible for William and Harry to go through that, but there are differing accounts since about whether they regret doing it or being persuaded to do it or all the rest of it. In terms of changing the royal family, the Queen, I think the Queen and Philip absolutely did the right thing in the first few days of staying at Balmoral with the boys.
Despite the criticism from the press.
Which then grew over the days of, show us you care, and the Union Jack on the Buckingham Palace. In the old protocol, if the Queen wasn't in residence, there was no flag at Buckingham Palace. There was no flag to have
Diana
a half-mast.
Diana changed protocol in life and in death, didn't she?
Yes, and so that's why the Union Jack now flies at Buckingham Palace when the King is not in residence, because in case it needs to be half-masted for some reason.
Yeah.
So the Queen then came down to London, and there, went for that, not a walkabout, but went to see the tributes in front of Buckingham Palace, and there were ripples of applause, and she made that, very well judged broadcast on the eve of the funeral, speaking as a
grandmother,
speaking as a grandmother. And speaking warmly about Diana. That did change things, but it was a very rocky moment for the royal family, specifically for Prince Charles, as he then was.
Yeah.
Interesting to see in the polling that you mentioned earlier that Camilla still divides opinion. There's still despite everything.
It's really interesting. I wrote a profile of Camilla just before the coronation in 2023, and I think there was a phrase in there. Someone described her as divisive, and I wasn't sure whether or not to include it. I remember mentioning it to someone who knows her very well, who said it's fair enough, and she would have no issue with that because she knows she's divisive.
Yeah.
And actually takes it on the chin.
Yeah.
And that's sort of baked into her, what she thinks the public's perception of her.
But, when you think back almost 30 years when she was portrayed as the Wicked Witch of the West Country who had brought the whole thing crashing down, of course it wasn't her fault. But when you think of her public image then compared to now, it's extraordinary.
It's been a complete rehabilitation, hasn't it?
But there, in those opinion polling, clearly there's that demographic who will never come round, and it's just off limits because of what happened in the mid 1990s and then the crash in Paris. Yeah.
I think you and I can probably both agree that one of the biggest changes since we've been doing this job in terms of the royal family has been the departure of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Harry and Meghan. I mean, it was a pretty seismic split when it happened back in 2020. But even though they're no longer members of the, working members of the royal family, of course, they're still much loved members of the royal family, as the phrase is often deployed, they still garner an enormous amount of attention, particularly from the press, elements of the press. We've had this week another announcement from Netflix and Harry and Meghan about their relationship with Netflix as what they've called an extension of the agreement with Netflix, but it's a very different kind of agreement, isn't it? And it goes to the heart of what they're doing what they try to do quite differently to other members of the royal family who've stayed, within the working fold. There have been books, there have been TV shows, there have been podcasts. What do you make of kind of the new direction that they've gone in for the last 5 years?
Well, I mean, clearly those initial deals with Spotify and Netflix were huge. And so my question with the Netflix deal and the new deal is a first look arrangement whereby they have to bring proposals, first of all, to Netflix for them to either say, yes, we'll take that, or no, actually, you can take that somewhere else if you want to. So that's very different to the first deal. The first deal, obviously, the documentary, which
Blockbuster
was Blockbuster. That is what has got the ratings. And so behind the scenes documentaries about polo and cooking shows, less viewers, less eyeballs on those.
Yeah.
Although Meghan's second series is starting soon, but clearly didn't rate as well as the memoirs. The issue with Harry, and he said he's left a lot of stuff unpublished and unsaid.
It's a big threat, isn't it?
Well,
that
yeah.
hangs.
But yes, I mean, he said that he will never, but never say never.
Yeah.
And that's what Netflix want.
Do you think that's why Netflix still want to keep that relationship going? I mean, Meghan's talked about the fact that, she might write a book one day, hasn't she? I mean, she said, I've never had to sign anything that says I can't talk about or write about what I want. Do you think that's why Netflix have kept the relationship going in some form or other in case there's a second bite at some more tell-all material?
That would make absolute sense, wouldn't it? And I think there was controversy when the stuff that went into the book, Spare, wasn't in the Netflix series a couple of months before, because the book came out in the January and the Netflix series had been over, I think, during December. So I think Netflix were asking questions then about why wasn't that stuff in the TV series.
Do you think it's changed the nature of what the public understand as what it means to be royal? The fact that members of the royal family can go off and make, tell-all documentaries like that. Has it shifted public perception, do you think?
I think it's obviously changed people's perception of Harry.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing is so avoidable, could have been so avoidable, but egos obviously got in the way. And
do you think that the sort of half in, half out thing that they wanted could have been workable?
Well, he clearly no, I don't. But I mean, he clearly thinks it was workable. And he clearly, from the book, believes that was offered to him before at the Sandringham Summit in 2020. It was all taken away. You're either in or you're out. But he clearly felt that 6 months in the UK was possible and 6 months somewhere else doing whatever else they wanted to do. But I don't see how you can do that without being accused of cashing in.
How does it affect the royal brand, though, do you think? Because I mean, you mentioned it, we know because we see the polling, we listen to what people sort of say about Harry. Harry has gone from being one of the most popular members of the royal family to, if you believe the polls here, the YouGov polls, he's slid right down the scale in terms of popularity. But in terms of sort of, the royal brand, how do you think it affects it having a sort of this alternative court in Montecito doing very, very different things?
I think it will become less and less relevant if that's what they're doing. And people in the UK, I mean, maybe there's more interest in America, but people in the UK, it's very divisive, let's face it.
Yeah.
And people in the UK often say, I don't want to hear any more about them, and then read exactly what's in the polling's interesting. We know the royal family do their own private, unpublished polling.
We'd love to see that, wouldn't we?
They probably
Dear royal family, please can we see your unpublished polling?
Yeah.
Love the royal correspondence.
They will have polled on this.
Yeah, of course.
And they must have come to, the King and Prince William must have come to the decision that it has to be either wholly in or wholly out, and the halfway house is not going to work. And I wouldn't be surprised if they'd done that in 2019 when the whole thing was falling apart.
To see whether there was a way forward to do it.
And then the Sandringham, that would make sense of what Harry's saying, that, it was offered and then that offer was taken away.
It's interesting in terms of, Harry and Meghan they've struck these big deals with the streamers, with Netflix, with Spotify, some more successful than others. The podcast hasn't done quite so well. Netflix is still kind of, keeping their toe in. But now we have the King also making a documentary. Yeah. Moving into that kind of territory, making a documentary with Idris Elba about the King's Trust.
Yeah.
And that's a Netflix production as well. So they must look at the model maybe and go, well, is there something to be done there, but in a slightly different way? I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, copy approval, they've got complete control over it, haven't they? And Idris Elba obviously has worked for the Prince's Trust for many years and was a beneficiary of the Prince's Trust back in the day. And we saw him at that event at Clarence House last year, and staff have moved from Clarence House to Idris Elba's company, I believe. And so there is a lot of synergy there. It makes absolute sense for them to put together what I'm sure will be a great show with total copy approval.
I mean, Netflix must be delighted that they have the King and the King's son and his wife on their books, technically. I mean, if you were to go back sort of 10, 20 years, when we first started doing this job, I mean, would I have envisaged that, members, the King and members of the royal family would be making documentaries with Netflix? I don't think I would have seen that coming. But it seems to be going more, William is making documentaries on homelessness and it seems to be going more in that direction.
Yeah. It'd be very interesting to see if he does an interview or if it's more of a conversation with Idris Elba at certain events. The Queen, of course, didn't do interviews, and the King hasn't since he became king. So it'd be interesting to see if there's a proper interview there.
Do you think they are, I mean, in terms of sort of, the commercial side of it, obviously, when the King makes a documentary with Netflix, I think a lot of it will probably, if there's any sort of, commercial benefit, a lot of that will probably go back into his charities. But in terms of breaking through with the public, having a more direct sort of route to the public rather than just through the press, do you think it's part of that strategy as well?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense for them, doesn't it? They with Instagram posts and X posts and whatever else they're doing, they have total control over that. I remember in the early days of that, the mainstream media, really struggled with that. And do we report it or not? And because they're curating it and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, it's just the way it's been. And that's,
Yeah.
The photo, for example, the photos of the children on birthdays and Mother's Day and whatever, great photos, lovely informal photos, which we all publish and we all run. Bit of a problem last year with some of those pictures, as we know.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have total control over it, don't they? So a Netflix series, I'm sure he will come across really well because he is a very warm, genuinely cares about the issue. He will come across very well, and it will be totally curated, and they'll have total control, as the Sussexes do.
They do.
In their Netflix.
I mean, what comes out of Meghan's, her second series of With Love Meghan is coming out at the end of August. We've seen the trailer this week. We're promised a holiday special with Meghan that's going to come in December, which will probably be, Meghan's tips on Christmas and maybe Thanksgiving. Very much a kind of look inside of, how Meghan does Christmas. It's a very different thing to, the Christmas celebrations here, which are, we have the Princess of Wales does her annual carol concert, which is all about, it feels much more, that's a very sort of wholesome sort of set piece now, isn't it? But it's a very striking, we're going to have Meghan's holiday special, Netflix special, and then Kate at Westminster Abbey, very wholesome with the family and, children and charities. It's quite a stark contrast as the court in Montecito and the court here, isn't it?
It is. Absolutely, yeah. It is. And I wonder how much longer the Montecito thing will get those sort of viewing figures that they want. I'm not sure the cooking show did.
No.
Or indeed the behind the scenes at Polo, which I'm sure is very interesting.
It definitely didn't.
It definitely didn't. So how much longer is that going to go on with Netflix and, the Sussexes in California? I don't know. But it is, it's a very different vibe to what's happening here.
I mean, what do you think are the other options for them if they're not doing, if they're not making Netflix shows? We know this, we've had Harry has very sadly had to step away from his charity, Centre Barley, which was the charity helping children affected by HIV in Lesotho. That, and Invictus are his sort of core things. If that's not going on for him, and let's say, Netflix doesn't continue forever and ever, what do you think the options would be going forwards for Harry and Meghan in terms of, career, making money, being commercial? Because that's what they went to America to, as they said, have a new kind of financial freedom.
Well, my guess would be we will see them in front of cameras less and less, and they'll be behind the camera more, executive producing their own projects.
But that's not what the public wants, is it?
It's not what Netflix want, no. They want part 2 of the
Spill the beans.
Yeah. And he said that there's a lot of stuff he's kept back, which he will never talk about. But, that will be the pressure on him. And he will only find relief from that pressure if, they're making money elsewhere, which will give him the independence, That's the problem.
Do we think there'll be another book one day?
Yeah, there's bound to be another book, isn't there?
You think? A sequel to
whenever anybody says, that's it, that's all I'm going to say.
There's always more.
Yeah. Money talks, doesn't it?
So we are here in the middle of a heat wavy kind of British summer, and most of the royal family are on their annual break up at Balmoral or away on their holidays. But the King and Queen are taking a break this week from Balmoral, and they're going to be travelling to Staffordshire to the National Memorial Arboretum to commemorate the 80th anniversary of VJ Day, which marks the end of the war in the Pacific against the Japanese and the end of the Second World War. So it's a major commemoration. Of course, we had the 80th anniversary of VE Day just a few months ago, and that was a huge parade in London, the Mall. We had all the veterans. We had the tea party with the veterans at Buckingham Palace, the King and Queen, and William, Kate, and even Prince George went. This is quite a different thing, but I think it's still going to be quite, a moment, a significant moment. The King is going to record an audio message for the moment. It's the first big commemoration at the Arboretum that the King and Queen have done. We've had the Duchess of Edinburgh out this week as well. She's meeting a veteran of VJ Day, starting sort of the commemorations. But there is an absence. We don't have any presence from the Waleses. And I suppose I wanted to ask you, A, is that significant? Does that matter that William and Kate aren't around for this big moment? But also, should they be, do you think?
Yeah, they should be. And it does, it absolutely does matter. It's weird. It shows how thinly spread the senior team in the royal family is now, because it is, as you say, it's the King and the Queen and the Edinburghs are taking part in these engagements. And it is strange that William and Kate aren't there. VE Day in May obviously gets all of the publicity.
Yeah.
But the war in the Pacific, the war in Asia is, the people and the families of those servicemen and women feel it's the forgotten war. And VJ Day doesn't get the same sort of publicity. It didn't get the same sort of publicity here 80 years ago.
No.
And so yes, for the King and the Queen to go to the Arboretum, which I by the way, is a wonderful place.
Yeah,
I thoroughly recommend all sorts of different memorials there. For them to go is significant. For them, as you say, it's during their normal, what would be their normal summer holiday. And for William and Kate not to be in London or somewhere on that day is significant and is strange. I'm surprised we don't have any explanation of that. They did take part in the VE Day commemorations. They're not going to be there at VJ Day.
I mean, for them, I suppose, if they would say that they want to take sort of, time off to be with the family. But at the same time, we're looking at, there's always a lot of talk around modernising the royal family, making it relevant, keeping it relevant to the public as it evolves. And, are young people interested in the royal family? Less so. You have the royal family, most of the royal family going off on a very extended break over the summer, 2 months off, 2.5 months off. The King, of course, they'll all be back in September for the state visit with Donald Trump, which we're looking forward to covering. But in this day and age, when, a lot of people have busy lives and are working, do you think is it slightly off message for members of the royal family to go off for like 2 to 3 months, take these very extended breaks? Is it a bit off message?
Yeah. I think, there has been, over the years, there has been criticism, murmurings about William and how many royal duties he takes on. And I think this is this was an easy one to identify that, actually you should be at that one. You've got to be at that one. And of course, family holidays and all the rest of it, we all accept that, but it is a long break. I think it is strange. It's going to look strange when people see the pictures of the commemoration and he's not there.
I mean, the King, we know, the King works very hard. He's got a very busy diary. He's been having cancer treatment since the beginning of last year. I think no one would begrudge him having an extended break, up in Scotland. We've done a lot with him. We went to Canada for less than 24 hours with him. It was a very busy summer and he's still doing engagements up in Scotland. I suppose they disappear for a couple of months. They then come back. Do you think, I just wonder whether going forwards, that's sustainable, that kind of following the seasons is sustainable for the royal family. What do you think? Yeah,
I think August is probably sacred. It used to be with the late Queen, obviously.
Longer, didn't it?
Yes, and obviously she was an elderly woman, and so it used to go way into September, and she loved. In fact, we're coming up to the 3rd anniversary, aren't we? She was at Balmoral when she passed away 3 years ago. I think August is probably sacrosanct, but as you say, September is going to be very busy this year with the state visit.
And also, they will all be around for the state visit. William will be all over it because Donald Trump's such a fan.
And Harry, of course, separately, Harry is going to be another visitor from the United States. Harry's going to be here because Wellchild is one of the fixtures of his calendar.
Early September, and all eyes will turn to whether or not Harry will see his father during that trip.
I mean, it's just so weird if he doesn't, but...
it will be, given he's not seen him since last February.
Yeah. It's the whole thing is such a mess. And as I said, completely avoidable, I think, but ego's got in the way. But if he doesn't see him on this trip...
Then when?
I mean...
If not now, when?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't expect him to see William, but
no.
I don't suppose you do either. But
I don't think that's going to be a brotherly reconciliation in September. No. But one would hope he might find a way, without the circus, to see his father.
And I think the saddest thing for me is not seeing the king not seeing the grandchildren. There's got to be a way where they can sort this out. The security row has obviously got in the middle of all of this, but there must be a way of doing it.
Well, the royals have got their out of office on. You and I don't. I mean, when people ask me about this job, what's it like being a royal correspondent? What's it like reporting on the royal family? Do you get to know them all? How do you write things that are difficult? How do you manage that? And I often give the answer that this job, every single day, every single week, every single month, is like a diplomatic tightrope walk, because you have to navigate between access, managing relationships, maintaining trust, reporting without fear or favour, being critical when you need to, and all of that. For you, how do you manage the balance? How do you find that in terms of the news, being critical when you want to be, managing the fallout with the households? And how have you seen that change over the years you've been doing it?
I think the main point for me is actually during the coronation and in the run-up to the coronation, we did a fair bit on republicanism, and I did a couple of features on it. It really interests me how the opinion polling on that is pretty much solid at about 25% of abolition of the monarchy.
It's quite a stat. A quarter of the population would be in favour of abolishing the monarchy.
And we get criticised
for reporting that.
We get criticised for reporting it, or not reporting it enough by those who want to abolish the monarchy. But I did do features on that in the run-up to the coronation. So
how did that go down with the households?
I don't know, and I don't care, because I think we should cover it.
Quite right.
We are journalists, not PR officers. You do your job, we'll do our job.
You do.
It is important. I mean, there's 23% of people. I've always thought, most of this country is in the middle. There are red hot royalists and there are red hot Republicans, but mostly most Brits are in the middle. The flashpoint for me is the money.
Right.
The private money. And it's, we've been reporting on royal finances for many, many years. And the more you know, the less you know.
It's so true.
It's very opaque. But to cut a long story short, the private money from the Duchy of Cornwall for William and the Duchy of Lancaster for the King, I was really interested by what the Sunday Times and Dispatches did with the duchies, which I think was fantastic work and genuinely shocking that primary schools and ambulance stations and all the rest of it are getting charged that, which obviously has now changed, getting charged rents.
Well, wasn't it interesting us sitting in and going along to the Duchy of Cornwall annual review this year, and the new head of the Duchy of Cornwall who's running it for William effectively saying, we've taken on board that criticism, and William's thought about it, and we've thought about it, and this is what we're changing. So it does show you the impact of that, not just with the public, but also with the members of the royal family.
Yeah. In terms of the taxpayers' money, the public money that goes towards them, we report on that each year, and they come up with some bogus stat about it being 63 pence per person per year. But we all know
you old cynic, Simon.
Well, no, because it never includes the security.
Yeah.
And nobody knows how much the security costs because it's so complicated between the Home Office and the MOD and all the rest of it. No, we will never know how much it costs. But it's not the figure that's in the annual accounts. So that's the bit that interests me. I wish I did it a bit more than once a year.
Yeah.
And that was why it was great to see the stuff on the duchies.
Simon, I've been asking you a lot of questions. We've had a couple of thoughts and questions in from our listeners, our global listeners, Simon, who email us in and like to ask questions and say things. So this is from Gia from California. Gia says, hi, I wanted to write a note to let you know that I really enjoy listening to your podcast. Thanks, Gia. I love your weekly updates, your perspective and personal experiences at the events, as well as the special episodes you do. P.S. Please keep Will's Week. I think it's great. Thank you, Gia. Okay, noted, Gia. We will keep going with Will's Week. This is from Natalie. We don't know where she is, but Natalie says, hello. Thank you so much for a weekly dose of royal insight and wisdom. It's a joy to receive the notification that there's a new podcast. And here's her question. I wanted to ask about the service of the Order of the Bath anniversary. The service all appeared very grand and beautiful with flowing red robes combined with the Prince of Wales and the King processing around Westminster Abbey and the Prince then taking up the role of the Grand Master. A wild title, as Natalie says. I'm intrigued to know your thoughts on the relevance of these kind of orders in our society today and the impact they have. What are your thoughts about how the Prince of Wales perceives these ancient, historic orders? And how important might he consider them to the role when he'd like to forge for himself and the monarchy going forwards? What do you think there, Simon? It's a good question from Natalie.
It's
Thanks,
great,
Natalie.
Yeah. And the Order of the Bath is interesting if you're into that sort of thing.
What is the Order of the Bath, Simon?
The Order of the Bath is very prestigious, but it's not. It's below the Order of the Garter, which is when we see them processing
These are all
down.
orders of chivalry.
Orders of chivalry, yes. So that the Order of the Garter goes back to Edward III, I think, and that's the service we see at Windsor Castle at St George's Chapel every year. Order of the Bath was started by George I, I think, or reinstated by George I. It's to do with knights being bathed when they are knighted, which that doesn't happen anymore. But that's what the Bath is. Slightly strange title now. Crimson robes, I think, and they have the service once every 5 years at Westminster Abbey. I don't think William thinks this is very important stuff, but I'm sure he will keep it going.
I agree.
And I think the Order of the Bath is mostly for military types and civil servants, people who've given distinguished service to the country and the Commonwealth, but it's not one of the more famous ones.
No, I think if I was to answer Natty's question, what do you think William thinks of them and would he keep them going? I'd agree with you. I think I was watching the footage of that and the images that came out of the Order of the Bath service a couple of months ago, and he doesn't look very comfortable in all those robes. I think when William is draped in all the kind of, you look at him and think, he's thinking this is not my vibe.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you talk to people very close to William, as I did recently for a very big piece on like his future reign and how he wants to reign, they will say to you, William, it might not be his vibe, but he also understands the sort of magic around some of the pomp and pageantry, and he understands the public, quite a lot of them like that. And he's not going to do away with it all because he understands it's intrinsic to the role and the institution. So I think he probably will keep those things going, even if he doesn't love getting into his fancy schmancy robes.
Yes. And the fancy schmancy robes he wore at the coronation were Order of the Garter robes.
They were.
The red, white and blue ones that Catherine had were the Royal Victorian Order.
Good knowledge,
which
Simon.
Are, well, I know my mantles. But the photographs of Kate at the coronation were incredibly striking.
Very.
So those red, white and blue robes are the Royal Victorian Order. And he was in Order of the Garter. I think Andrew was as well. But
that's a whole other episode, Simon. Simon, finally, if there's one question you could ask a member of the royal family, you could ask any one question, what would you ask and who would you ask it of?
Can I have a serious one and a funny one?
You can have two.
Well, so the serious one would be to the King. How do you defend this system? Or do you defend this system?
Wow. Okay, good question.
Would you welcome a referendum?
On the institution of the monarchy?
I think they would win. But I'd be interested to know what William thinks as well, actually. I mean, it's an amazing thing we have. It's hundreds of years old. If you were inventing it today, this is not what you would invent. But that's part of the point, isn't it? This is something that's rolled down the centuries with this family firm, one way or another, in charge.
Only we could put you in front of the King to ask that question. And what's your funny?
Who's the funniest member of the family?
Who would you ask that of? The King's a great mimic, actually.
And apparently the late Queen was
She was, yeah.
Great mimic as well. I don't know who would be the funny. It would be somebody random, wouldn't it? Princess Michael of Kent.
I'm not sure about that. Well, that's it for this week. Simon, it's been an absolute delight to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on, Simon Vigar of Channel 5 News. And in the meantime, if you want to ask us any more questions, please get in touch and email us at theroyals@thetimes.co.uk. But thank you again, Simon.